Hello and welcome back to another episode of Game Chat. Don't know when these are going to come out, but this week, month, year, time, we're going to be talking about Total War Rome 2. One of my favourite games to play because it's a strategic game when you come down to the kind of lower level, but it has the grand level of managing your empire, managing your settlements, your population's happiness, its food, managing diplomacy within your own faction and against other factions. It's an incredible game, and it's set during one of my favourite periods in history is the early Roman Empire and the late Republic. Just the innovations in military, economic innovations, it's an incredible period in history, and kind of set the course for a lot of what modern day became. And of course, even the language, Latin, what most languages, maybe not most, but a lot of kind of common languages are based on. English, French, Italian, Spanish, it's all kind of based off Latin. And it's a brilliant period in history. But anyway, it's not a history show. It's supposed to be about the game, not the period it's set in as much. So we'll move on to kind of the basic kind of mechanics of the game. So you start out as whatever empire you choose, or whatever faction you choose, and from there you build your empire. Personally, I prefer to go as Rome most of the time, or some of the Hellenic factions, Macedon, Seleucids, Egypt, that kind of. And I typically try and play them fairly historically accurate, so accurate units, all that kind of stuff, accurate land borders. So once you pick your faction, you have your starting cities. Usually it's in around kind of 3-4 settlements you have to start off with, and maybe 1 or 2 armies. And at first you're pretty useless, your 1 or 2 armies are under strength, bad units. Depending on which faction you choose, you start at war sometimes, which is never good. You're almost, clearly starting a war, 2 armies, 4 settlements, it's not going to go well for you, is it? But starting as Rome, it's of course going to be one of the easier starts, because it kind of starts you a little bit into Roman history, to where they've already have the Republic established, and they already have their triplex axis kind of fighting style, which is taking the Italian peninsula by storm. They're kind of steamrolling everything. So you start off with most of the Italian peninsula, and from there, it's this slow slog, settlement by settlement, enemy by enemy. You conquer your way to the Roman Empire, and that is actually something you can work towards. If your family, that's the politics system in the game. You have your families. You choose your family at the start, and each one kind of has a bonus to certain things. But if your family is too powerful, it will cause civil war with the other families. So, no matter what you're doing, you could be at war in Egypt, you could be at war in Gaul, wherever, all at once, and then next thing, bang, civil war erupts. You have some like 10, 20 Senate legions sitting in the middle of Italy, and then you're screwed. You have to bring back all your armies, lose ground on all fronts, all that kind of stuff. But it's an interesting mechanic, and it's one you can, when I come to the faults in the game later, it's kind of worthless kind of system, the political system. It's kind of just but it can cause some issues if you don't kind of pay attention to it, and either get it out of the way nice and early and kind of force it to happen early on, or just keep it in, give it enough attention to just kind of keep the power nice and level. Either way, it's just kind of it doesn't have that big of an effect if you kind of concentrate and just kind of take care of it early on. Other kind of mechanics of it are, there's a diplomacy mechanic where you can negotiate trade agreements, non-aggression pacts, allies, client states, satrapies, which are basically just puppet states. Declare war, your basic kind of stuff for any RTS game, real-time strategy. But on that note, we'll move down my list, well, scribbles on a piece of paper if you want to call that a list, onto kind of the combat and tactics of the game. So you recruit troops from your towns, cities, by building certain buildings which allow you, recruitment of your various troop types. As Rome, of course, you're going to be focusing on kind of your heavy infantry, your legionnaires, different factions have different options. Obviously, a lot of the Hellenic, kind of Greek states have a lot of spearmen, pikes, hoplites, that kind of thing. But when you actually get into combat with each army can have up to 20 units, unless you start getting into mods, which I'll get into at some point. But each army consists of 20 units, roughly, and before the battle starts, or when you attack an enemy or get attacked, you have a deployment phase. So if you're being attacked, you can see the enemy's deployments, and you can kind of deploy your troops to kind of counter whatever they're doing to an extent. This is where another fault in the game is the AI of the computer is not amazing. It's quite kind of, they just kind of bunch up into a ball and just kind of try and just break through everything, which just doesn't work because they're idiots. But with mods and that, it really does. Some mods really do help the fact of how bad the AI is. It kind of makes it a little more challenging. Changing the difficulty, really, I mean, all it does is it just gives ridiculous advantages to the AI. It doesn't make it any smarter. It makes their troops, 10 times or twice as tougher, or that kind of stuff. Whereas certain mods actually try to upgrade and teach the AI how to flank, how to hold forces in position, basic kind of human, knowledge level tactics, as opposed to just giving them ridiculous buffs on top of ridiculous buffs. But when you do get into combat, unmodded, just kind of base game combat, it's very arcadey. It's just, you stand there, you put your troops there, you charge at them, whoever has the best troops wins. There's no tactics or anything involved. It's just throw men at each other, whoever has the best men wins. Simple as that. But with a lot of mods, and that is one major fault to the game, is that the base game is it's not an amazing base game. It's a good base game, but it's not an amazing base game. It's the community around it and the modding abilities of that community which make it an amazing game. Especially if you're a fan. There's a lot of historical mods out there which kind of make it a more historical game, more historical units, all of that kind of stuff. With just a little bit of searching, you can really mod the game to your taste, either more arcadey, more historic, kind of in between. You can do what you kind of want with it when it comes to mods, and mods will exist for whatever you are looking for. So I guess that's kind of the battles covered. I'm not sure. Battles and tactics covered. I'm not really sure. I kind of lost my way there a little bit. Went a bit of a rant about mods and how I kind of done the faults bit a bit early. I was kind of going to leave the faults of the game to the last, but kind of threw that in the middle of it all too. So as you can see, this is even my attempt at making it semi-structured has not gone well. So you're kind of getting a feel for where this show might go. Just kind of mayhem, chaos. It's kind of all over the place. And kind of while talking or bringing up the fact of the terrible AI, kind of mention about the multiplayer. Actually play against real humans with brains who aren't maybe idiots, but it presents a real challenge at times. Obviously, of course, you're going to have some people who haven't a clue. They're worse than the AI. It's just going to happen. But you come up against some real people with some of them could read or study history, and kind of know ancient warfare tactics and that kind of stuff. But it really does pose a challenge at times to kind of keep up with your opponent's movements and kind of try and predict what they're going to try and do. And it definitely adds a layer of difficulty and a layer of depth to the game, which I think it really did need. Because if it was just a single player on its own with no modding, it would be a fail. The single player with no mods and no multiplayer, it wouldn't sustain itself because it was too arcadey, and it just kind of it went more for a casual audience as opposed to the hardcore audience, which would have been with them through the various Total War titles before it. So I guess that kind of brings us to the faults. I'm not really sure at this point. I've kind of talked about everything else, I think. Basic mechanics, kind of check. Gameplay, kind of check. Combat, kind of check. Factions, kind of check. Historical setting, that's a definite check on that one. And the multiplayer, which I've covered. So yeah, I'm going to stick in some music from Rome 1 because it had better soundtrack. The fault kind of just dotted those all around instead of kind of just putting them in at the start. But Gonna kind of put in some Rome 1 music underneath and finish it out maybe with some music from the official soundtrack of Rome 2.